welcome to another NESN Soccer Show. I'm Marc, you're Marcus, and we watched a pretty exciting Gold Cup final last night. At least towards the end, USA went on top.
Wasn't that exciting.
Well,
there, I said it.
To each his own.
Let's get it out early.
Well, I guess I think I was thinking in terms of all the other games from the tournament, just in general. And this was a final. The stadium was pretty full, all of that, and USA won. So, and the goals were good. But
the
anyway,
goals were excellent. Yes.
Yeah.
I prefer the semifinal to the final. I thought the semifinal was a lot more compelling and dramatic, and dare I say it, entertaining.
Okay. Well, you know, Josie's free kick, I think, was one of the best free kick goals by a U.S. men's national team player while playing for the national team that I've seen in a long time, which is pretty specific. But
yeah,
but yeah, I don't want to say it was the greatest kick ever, because I mean we've seen players do that, but to see a U.S. player do it for the U.S. was pretty great. But anyway, we were talking about how it's great to win the Gold Cup, and we get to play in that Confederations Cup qualifying match, which will be exciting when it eventually comes.
Yep.
But this tournament really is more about the individual player, something we've been talking about throughout the tournament. Certain guys trying to prove themselves, maybe put themselves on the map for like a World Cup qualifying or for a World Cup roster, and take themselves from getting the games versus Martinique to getting the qualifying games. And then maybe a guy like Jordan Morris, who had an outstanding tournament, but went from maybe, okay, this is a offensive bench option, to, well, maybe he could start in certain situations if the matchup's right. So my question for you is, what were your biggest takeaways from the Gold Cup? Which players really stood out to you?
The biggest takeaways, I guess, well, it was more about the team, I think, than the players itself. I know we talked about this being a player-focused Gold Cup, but one of the big takeaways is that there's a winning mentality in this team that Bruce Arena has brought back.
Right, a lot of people talking about
they were on their knees last October, November, and we're not even 12 months from there. But Bruce Arena's come in since early November and really gotten, a number of players improve their form, and their performances are they're a little bit better. I mean, we still haven't seen anything vintage out of this team, but
no, not quite. But it is the stat that everybody's throwing out is 14. His first 14 matches without a loss, only wins and draws, which is a record for a U.S. men's national team coach.
Right.
To start his tenure.
Yeah, 14 games unbeaten is nothing to it's nothing to sniff at. It's not a 14-game winning streak. We'd all be waving flags on top of the State House if that was the case. But they're not losing.
Yeah. Which
before he came, they were losing. So it's an improvement.
And now the games start to really sort of rev up.
Yeah.
It's the chance to officially qualify for the World Cup. Is coming up, not in the next two. Well, a lot of different scenarios can take place, but we could qualify with maybe a game to spare.
Yeah, it'll probably happen in October.
Yeah.
I think right now ESPN had the chances of qualification in the high 80s thereabouts. So, two games coming up: Costa Rica on September 1st, at Honduras on September 5th. I think 4 points from those two games, and U.S. will be sitting pretty come October.
4 points seems to be the goal every time we come around with these two World Cup qualifiers.
That's what it is. Yeah, one home, one away.
And I mean, we're talking about the Gold Cup, but we didn't see Christian Pulisic, DeAndre Yedlin, John Brooks, and Fabian Johnson. So those guys will be back in the team. You would have to expect, barring injury, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, we started talking about it. What players from the Gold Cup and their performance do you think have earned a right to appear in the World Cup qualifiers in September?
First and foremost has to be Jordan Morris.
Yeah.
3 goals in the tournament, tied for a share I guess if they could split the Golden Boot, he would get a little piece of it.
Yeah.
He showed that he can perform at this level and score goals at this level, and that's really, he was energetic, he was lively. That's really what you want from a forward.
Right.
And I think that's going to be the difference when, you start making cuts at that position. You have to think Altidor's in, Bobby Wood's in, and then that leaves 2 spots, Jordan Morris, Dom Dwyer, maybe a couple others. Morris, he's really positioned himself to be maybe the number 3 striker on that team right now.
What I love about Morris, and it's kind of a cliche, but I think with a forward, there's a certain quality that it's very hard to measure, because you can look at speed, agility, quickness, first step, finishing ability. I think, Jordan Morris is great in all those and great finishing ability, but he seems to always be on the ball. Like, not just passing, but like he reads deflections well, and he knows where the ball is going to end up, even if it's not a pass to him. And I think several of his goals come that way, and the game winner was sort of a broken play that he got his foot on and had a fantastic finish.
Yeah.
But he always seems to be in the right spot, which is kind of like a little thing as a forward where sometimes it's hard to be in the right spot.
Yeah, it's an intangible that is ultra important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just being able to anticipate the play and know where it might be. There are some players, and I'm not counting Jordan Morris in this category, but some players are on the field. They don't do much that's flashy or even look impactful, but they win when they're on the field. Their teams win. Maybe they don't score a lot of goals, don't get a lot of assists. Maybe they lose the ball a lot sometimes. I'm not saying Jordan Morris is one of these players, but there are some players who, for whatever reason, they help the team win.
And kind of like Michael Bradley. I feel like a lot of people give him that.
I'm not putting him in this category either.
Okay.
But Jordan Morris, there's a stat going around where in the last 18 months he won the NCAA championship with Stanford in 2015. A year later, he wins MLS Cup with Seattle Sounders 2016. Now he wins the Gold Cup in 2017.
And the World Cup.
Jordan Morris might be on the World. If he keeps this up, he'll be on the World Cup winning team in 2018.
Well, that'd be nice.
Once his German passport comes in.
Right. Well, all right. Well, enough singing the praises of Jordan Morris. He had a great tournament, but we also saw Brad Guzan and Tim Howard play 3 games each in net. Tim Howard, I guess, the more important games. But what did you learn about that sort of goalie competition for the 2018 World Cup? Before I let you answer, Tim Howard will be 39 when the 2018 World Cup comes around. Guzan will be 33. Both kind of, well, for goalies, they're kind of, I don't want to say ageless, but they go a little longer. Yeah. But 39 is pretty old. And I'm as much of a Tim Howard fan as anybody, but could he be a step slower than Brad Guzan at that point?
I think Tim Howard will be probably as good as he is now, perhaps even better at this time next year. 39 years old, yes, it's old for most soccer players, but if you're a goalkeeper who's learned to manage his body, take care of himself, 39 is not that old. You can play at the top level at or around age 40. But this will be one of the great stories to watch over the next year is who is going to start in goal. They've been kind of 1 and 1A since the 2014 World Cup, and even after Tim Howard came back from his sabbatical, there was still competition.
Yeah.
I thought Brad Guzan, his stock dropped in this this Gold Cup.
Just slightly, but
he had made a couple mistakes against El Salvador, and then Tim Howard came in and
really
he really helped tighten things up, and he was there for the biggest games. He was great against Costa Rica when needed, and in the final he was good enough, helped win the Gold Cup.
Those mistakes that Guzan made were kind of it was kind of just like goals that he let in that as you look at it, it's like he should have saved that. But I think that's not really what ultimately separates them. I think it's kind of another intangible aspect of maybe he's a better communicator with the defense. Maybe he lines things up better.
Yeah.
You always see them both barking at the defense.
Yeah, yeah.
But
both of them are great shot stoppers. They'll
Yeah.
make the saves, but it's who really marshals that defense. And I got the sense the United States was a lot tighter at the back with Tim Howard back there.
What is great, though, is it's a good spot to be in when you got two, I guess, former Premier League goalies who are still as close to that as they ever were. And, even if Tim Howard is to go down with an injury, I don't think anybody really loses much confidence with GUZAN in the back.
No.
Nobody's going to sit there and say, well, that's part of the reason that we lost. They're going to blame the field players, basically,
Sure.
if that's what we are to lose.
But the problem is neither Tim Howard nor Brad GUZAN will be at the level that Tim Howard was in 2014.
Yeah, he was pretty much the top of his game. That's as good as a goalie can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
At least in one game.
yeah. It's still a good problem to have, I guess, to have two goalies
Sure,
that good. You also want to talk about the KELYNs,
Yes.
KELYN Acosta and KELYN ROWE.
Two different Gold Cup experiences. KELYN, maybe we'll start with KELYN ROWE. He played well in his the few minutes that he got in the early part of the tournament. He was one of the 6 changes who went back to his club team and didn't play in the knockout rounds. But by all accounts, everybody was impressed with KELYN ROWE and his contributions on the national team.
Was it almost surprising to see him go? I think a lot of, just the big names came in, so sort of whoever was taken off the team didn't really get much attention.
Yeah.
But I mean,
And
I
I don't think the
surprised.
decision to send him back to New England was had anything to do with his play.
It was probably just a plan.
Right.
Yeah.
It was part of the plan, and but he really impressed, and he's a guy who was a nobody internationally 2 months ago. Now he has probably played himself onto the cusp or onto the squad for the next 2 World Cup qualifiers. That'll be interesting to see. KELYN Acosta, on the other hand, is a player who had cemented himself in the squad. He started against Mexico in Mexico next to Michael Bradley. He had a bit of it was an up and down tournament for him.
Yeah.
I know at the beginning I predicted he was going to be, a player to watch and one of the standouts. He wasn't, and part of this Gold Cup was to see how players play under tournament conditions when you have to play 2 games in a week, maybe 3 games in 9 days or something like that. You're not going to keep. Most players can't keep the same level over that span of time. They'll have ups and downs. So, KELYN Acosta came off last night in the Gold Cup final after about 55 minutes thereabout. He was on a yellow card, but I was a bit surprised. But I think this experience at the Gold Cup gives Bruce Arena a chance to really see what this young KELYN Acosta is all about under tournament conditions, and how he can use him over in Russia.
Going back to KELYN ROWE real quick, I just it's good to see a play, because we talked so much about how big of an opportunity it is for a guy at the level of KELYN ROWE, and there were several players that were kind of at that level, and to see him just make the most of his opportunities is kind of what the whole tournament was about.
It's the name of the game.
So it's great to see it actually kind of come full circle, and now everybody knows his name, sort of, or at least in U.S. soccer circles. What else? Any lasting thoughts from the Gold Cup before we put it to rest and never look back on 2017 Gold Cup again?
I don't know. I think the main takeaway for me is this. I'd spoken about it previously. The flattening going on in CONCACAF, and Jamaica was a great example.
Yeah.
Where they came without some of their top players, some of their leading players, and they defended and countered their way all the way to the final. It's not the prettiest thing to watch, especially if you're somebody who likes to see free-flowing attacking soccer. But you know what? It was a big deal, especially in Jamaica. A friend of mine told me that before the game that if they win, I don't know if he was saying it tongue-in-cheek, but it would be a national holiday, and they'd be banging pans all night. We're now at a point in soccer where small teams, quote unquote, smaller teams, can beat bigger teams by playing a certain way and with a certain level of commitment and desire and determination.
Right, and I mean, you could see in the broadcast they're showing the Jamaica players and how devastated they were after the loss. Now, it was 1-1 until the 88th minute.
That game was going to extra time.
It's a brutal game, and to lose in that fashion, but also you don't get that devastated as a player unless you like are truly believing we are going to win this, and then it falls apart for you. And it just goes to show you that there was zero intimidation. It was roll the ball out and let's play. When they scored, it wasn't like surprise. It was all right. We're right where
back
we
in this game and we might win it.
And they fully expected to win until the last minute. Even in the final 2 minutes, I mean, they got the ball back up the field. They tried to get it back in there. They weren't shying away at any moment, which is just makes for better CONCACAF soccer. And I think ultimately, when you talk about world soccer and the likes of Mexico and the United States competing with European powers, it raises them up to then compete at a higher level when they get
It's a bit of the medicine that the United States gives to big nations in the World Cup, not in size but in reputation and quality, is the same medicine that they took from a team like Jamaica. You know, it's all about a learning experience, and the United States isn't going to go against a seeded team in the 2018 World Cup and control the ball. So what are they going to have to do? Defend and counter.
Speaking of big European clubs, the International Champions Cup has taken over the ESPN family of networks, and they've been playing games all throughout the U.S. For the last couple of weeks, I guess. And it comes to a conclusion, I think this weekend will be the final sets of matches. But Barcelona, Man United, Man City, Juventus and Roma, Tottenham, PSG, you know, just the biggest clubs in the world.
Some of them.
And a lot of others are in China.
There's
another International Champions Cup going on in China. But so it's exciting to see these players come to the U.S. and, you know, they're preseason games and kind of even lesser than, you know, maybe a NFL preseason game where the competition is even more relaxed. But there have been big crowds, sellout crowds at, you know, large 50,000 plus seat stadiums, 60,000 plus,
80,000 plus. Still selling them out.
So, you know, just real quickly, what does it say about the popularity of soccer in the United States? I mean, we were always having this conversation, but it's growing more and more. It's not slowing down.
We ask this question every year when they come, and the International Champions Cup is now part of the annual fabric of U.S. soccer. Some people like it, some people don't, some people are indifferent. Regardless of how you feel about it, it's here and it's here to stay. The organizers have found this sweet spot in the calendar where there's not too much going on in the United States sports scene. And they also know that there is this appetite to see the biggest soccer names in the world in the United States, and fans are willing to pay top dollar to do it. Barcelona is playing Real Madrid in Miami this weekend, and you're not walking into that stadium for less than $300. These are now major events all over the country, and it goes up against some of the domestic soccer that's being played, and it was up against the Gold Cup. Manchester City and Real Madrid were playing at the same time as USA Jamaica. There's a lot of soccer in this country. There's a big appetite for it, and this just proves once again, as it did last year and the year before, that, you know, these European teams are coming here to market themselves and also to prepare. Some of the best world-class facilities, world-class stadia, world-class training grounds.
Here's a question for you that literally just popped in my head. The International Champions Cup and all these gigantic teams coming and big-time players, you would think it would help the MLS. But does it sort of in an odd way maybe not help the MLS and make people are saying, well, I'll just go to a couple International Champions Cup matches. Maybe I'll go to a men's national team match every once in a while when it's close, and I don't need to worry about the MLS because I can just watch the rest on TV, and it's not the quality level that I want to see.
I don't have any data, but I suspect that the people that are going to see International Champions Cup games, the majority of them, over 50%, are not MLS fans.
Yeah.
They don't follow it, they don't watch it, they don't rate it. The soccer audience in this country is balkanized. A lot of people like different things. Some people like the Mexican league, some people like the Brazilian league, some people like the Portuguese league, some people like the English league, some people like MLS, some people like 2 or 3 of those. There's just a lot going on. It's a big market.
Right.
Seeing how the soccer contrasts with MLS, I always like the international. I always like the games where European teams come and play MLS teams because the MLS players are really up for it.
Right.
You know, not necessarily part of the International Champions Cup, but you know, if they have an ICC game in LA, they might play the LA Galaxy 2 or 3 days prior. And those games are always interesting to watch just because, you know, these American players, they're professionals too.
Right.
This is how they make their money. This is how they feed their families. So they want to test themselves.
Funny story about that happening. I think it was 2014 or 2015. Roma was in the U.S. doing a tour, and they played Orlando City FC before Orlando City was in the MLS.
Okay.
And I was at the match. It was in Orlando where Roma had also been training. So it was like they had this 2-week camp, and Orlando City was a friendly before they went to like the big stadium friendlies.
Right.
And I think they were on like the campus of UCF or something, but not even in UCF's like football stadium. It was very small. And an Orlando City player had a slide tackle on Tati, knocked him down. Tati got up and smacked him in the back of the head and was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And the Orlando City player was like, "What? I'm playing hard."
Yeah.
So it was very funny.
And they're in mid-season form, whereas the European guys are in preseason form. So it's a bit of a leveler, but the European teams always win for the most part.
Yeah. Well, so that brings us to Roma versus Juventus.
Yes.
Sunday, July 30th at Gillette Stadium, 4 o'clock Eastern time start. NESN will be on site for full coverage. You'll be there. I'll be there as a spectator.
Okay.
And we'll have some more video coverage going on. But when we talk about Gillette Stadium and soccer matches, they host the Revolution, and those matches draw okay. But I think in general, Gillette Stadium has hosted a wide range of soccer matches, from International Champions Cup to MLS to men's national team, and it has like mixed reviews as far as a soccer atmosphere. And so, does this match sort of present a chance for Gillette Stadium to, because Juventus has a gigantic following, Roma has a good following, there should be a lot of people at this match. Is Gillette Stadium, I don't know, trying to prove something as a soccer stadium?
Gillette Stadium has been a soccer stadium throughout its existence. The first event at Gillette Stadium was a New England Revolution game. I was there. Foxborough, Massachusetts has always been, at least in the quote-unquote modern era of soccer in this country, has always been one of the big venues to go to. It hosted World Cup games in 1994. It's hosted MLS Cup with the Revolution in it, with Revolution not in it. Big crowds in both. It's hosted U.S. national team games through the years. Excuse me, Copa America games. Foxborough has always been on the map in terms of competing for some of the biggest games and the biggest events. The map has now changed to include a number of smaller facilities, soccer-specific stadia.
Right.
It's
throwing a little wrench in it.
Right. So with this game coming up, Roma-Juventus, this is just another chance for Foxborough to remain in that mix, which is where it belongs.
Yeah.
That's been the case since, they started playing the sport in this country 100+ years ago.
Not to get too far ahead, but when I think about like 2026 World Cup and the idea that the U.S., Canada, Mexico bid will 99% be the host. Gillette Stadium is a world-class facility, but within the United States, it's like, you think about some of the stadiums being built. What's the most important match it could hope to host in that World Cup? I would think maybe a quarterfinal, probably
quarterfinal, round of 16 thereabouts.
Because you got Dallas, you've got, and it's not just that. It's in Foxborough, which is close to Boston, but when you consider there's a brand new stadium going up in Los Angeles, and New York just built a stadium. Atlanta's got arguably the best stadium, and then Dallas has Jerry's World. Right off the bat, you're like, okay, well now where are we?
Chicago, Houston, Arizona.
And then they're pretty much comparable to the ones that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's like if they chose Chicago over Gillette, you really couldn't argue it. But having said that, Robert Kraft named an honorary chairman of the USA, Canada, Mexico bid. So that probably bodes well for Gillette Stadium.
Yeah. They will be in the mix. I was surprised to see when the Gold Cup venues came out. I was somewhat surprised that Gillette wasn't one of them. And I think that was before they announced those venues, before the International Champions Cup was fully scheduled. So, I was worried actually a few months ago that there would be no quote-unquote big international events this summer at Gillette. Roma-Juve is a good one.
Definitely.
It's maybe not at the level of Barcelona, Real Madrid, Manchester United, Manchester City, but it's a good get.
It's the best that Italy has to offer.
Certainly.
So
for now.
Yeah, for now. Juventus and Roma finished 1-2 in Serie A in the 2016-17 Serie A table. Juventus finished 14 points clear of Roma, though. And Juventus won 6 straight Serie A's. They really have a string. Well, they were in the Champions League final last year and 3 years ago. Constantly in the Champions League semis or quarterfinals. So they're clearly the stronghold of Italian soccer. But I think, and you disagree, I think, that the gap is slowly but surely closing. I would like to believe. Monchi is recently taken over as, for Roma, player.
Director of football.
Director of football, whatever it is.
Thereabouts.
And that's encouraging. I think what happened was Juventus sort of modernized, and then the rest of Serie A was sort of left behind. And the rest of Serie A, I think, is slowly getting there, modernizing themselves, becoming more efficient, and coming up, and they're going to challenge Juventus, and I'm sticking to it.
That sounds like wishful thinking. Juventus modernized first, yes. They got their own privately funded stadium first, yes, and they've been reaping the rewards over and over again ever since then. Wishful thinking. I don't see Roma catching Juventus this year. Juventus was in the UEFA Champions League final 2-3 months ago.
Yeah.
Roma were nowhere near there. 14 points. Wasn't much of a Serie A title race.
No.
What I'm really worried about, not so much in this game, is that a year ago, if and when we were having this conversation, you would think the gap between Juventus and Roma is, let's call it 10 points, and you would have thought by this time, 2017, we would expect it to be cut in half. I would now say it's probably about 20 points.
Yeah.
The Roma's player sales, they've sold a number of their good players, and I worry about them, especially with AC Milan's summer spending frenzy. Should Inter Milan get their act together, I could see Roma falling out of the Champions League, out of those 4 spots.
Well, yeah, so the 4 spots, it's no longer 2 automatic spots and 1 third place play-in game spot for Champions League. It's now expanded to 4 automatic qualifying spots, which is in effect this season upcoming. I think Roma will remain in that top 4. I think that Totti, the last year especially, but really the last like 3 years, his playing time was a huge issue and weighed enormously on the club. You would think mainly on the manager, but I think the players felt it too. And now that he's stepped into an administrative role, I think it could be a big release for a lot of the players. And it's not exactly something that's actually happening on the field, but I think it could have a pretty big impact and just sort of keep them where they were as far as being able to contend and be in Champions League contention.
That sounds like the best case scenario. They have to stop selling their best players. They have to strengthen the team, or else they will fall out of the Champions League as they try and build a new stadium.
Being in the Champions League is the #1 concern, and is what has to happen simply for financial purposes. So Monchi probably has the leash to do whatever he feels necessary, as long as he's making sure he's going to stay hitting that
target, right?
Which there's a lot of leeway there. You can make a lot of moves and a lot of changes and still be in the top 4, because Serie A is frankly not as competitive as maybe the Premier League or La Liga or Bundesliga.
Yeah, it's quite competitive between, I would say, 2 and 6 thereabouts.
Definitely. And a lot of sides that have been in the top flight for a while but haven't finished, above 8th or 9th, in 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think the hope, as I feel like I've talked myself down, is or you've talked me down, is
that's what I'm here for.
to remain in Champions League contention and sort of buy time until Gianluigi Buffon is gone. And
it'll be about a year.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, so let's stop talking about how Juventus is so much better than Roma.
Okay.
We didn't talk about a final word today.
I do have one.
You do have one,
yes. All right. Out in Los Angeles, there is right now it's a cold soccer war between the LA Galaxy and LAFC. I was just reading about how fans are altering each other's, their billboards about, come see the LA Galaxy, and fans will spray paint LA in LAFC colors, making these little alterations.
Awesome.
So this has been going on now for, months, I guess. LAFC they have fans, they haven't kicked a ball yet. They start next season in 2018. But just today, in another back and forth salvo, earlier today, the Galaxy fired their head coach, Kurt Analfo. They've been struggling ever since Bruce Arena left to take over the national team. Galaxy fired Analfo, hired Siggy Schmidt, who is one of the godfathers of MLS coaching circles. I think he's got more wins than any coach in MLS history. Led the Galaxy between '99 and '04 thereabouts, and won at least 1 MLS Cup, maybe 2. And then he's gone on and won in Columbus. He had good teams in Seattle, never won. He was fired about a year ago to the day. Now he lands back at his old team, the LA Galaxy. Within 2 hours of that announcement, LAFC unveils their new coach,
I saw that.
Bob Bradley, who, when Swansea City fired him harshly last year, I predicted that he might be in the running for the LAFC job. LAFC announces Bob Bradley as their head coach within 90 minutes of the news breaking that LA had fired Analfo. So there is this cold war. It's shots going back and forth. They're both going to have their own stadium, so we won't have another big brother, little brother situation. But it should be fun. It's gonna become a hot war next year once they start playing.
Yeah, a lot of fun crosstown rivalry going on, and the stadiums are sort of in different areas of Los Angeles.
And I think they're attracting different
like different like demographics and whatnot.
Yes.
But LAFC is sort of more central and downtown located and sort of more accessible. And then the Galaxy, for anybody that knows the Los Angeles area, is sort of a little bit south of the city, and it's on like a college campus.
Right.
It's I think a little Orange County-ish, if that helps anybody. But
Not me, no.
Yeah.
It's
So,
far.
It is kind of far.
It's not in the urban core, and
No.
it seems like LAFC has really done well to capture people in that community.
Yeah. Well, I think that does it for this week. Follow the podcast on NESN.com/podcast, YouTube.com/NESN, SoundCloud.com/NESN-com, and iTunes/NESN.com. I think.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. The graphics up there. Yeah. Well, thanks, and we'll talk to you next week.